I'm Alan Dale from Gale Force Winds. It's fantastic to be back here at DEFSEC. Day 2, a lot of great conversations happening. Thanks to our good friends at Cisco sponsoring this conversation. They understand the importance of getting the stories out there. Our next guest, no stranger to Gale Force Winds. And Peter, why don't you catch us up on what's been going on with you?
Yeah, thanks, Alan, and great to be back with you and Jerry and Gale Force Winds. You're an institution now at this event and many others. And as you know, this really is, I believe, one of the most important discussions that we're having in Atlantic Canada, and that is our defense and security, our ingenuity, our ability to compete, our ability to be productive, competitive in other parts of the world. We have a lot going on in Atlantic Canada, and much of it is on full display here at the Halifax Convention Centre during this conference. And like other important forums, and I'll put in a plug for the Halifax International Security Forum, it's like molecules. All of these great companies and their representatives coming together, talking, finding synergies, finding ways that they can collaborate and work together. It is the secret sauce of this DEFSEC Atlantic.
Peter, you've had an amazing lens on things over the years, continue to provide quite a bit to the conversation. Are you seeing that good collaboration between government, industry, and academia in this sector right now?
Look, I'll put it this way: there can always be more. Just like you know, companies both in the private sector in Canada and elsewhere are always looking for funding, resources, the ability to go to the next level. And I don't want to get partisan, but it has not been a priority of this government to the extent that it has been in other times and other administrations, which I'm concerned about given the geopolitics of what's happening elsewhere in the world. You just have to put on the nightly news to see what's going on in Israel versus Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. Of course, the ongoing, we're past the 2-year mark now on what's happening in Ukraine. Tensions are at an all-time high in the South China Sea and Africa, and other, ongoing concerns around security. And Canada has been called out. We saw it at the last major NATO meeting. We've heard it from our allies. Where is Canada? Why aren't we seeing more robust interest and investment? And so I'm hoping that it will see a further change and certainly a much higher priority in terms of not just resources, but our interactions and our ability to collaborate, as you say, with our allies.
And when that happens, do you feel that industry here in Canada is poised to step up to these challenges?
Oh my God, Alan, they're raring to go. They're like a racehorse in the blocks. They want to do so much more. Some of these really great companies, Kraken come to mind. You just interviewed a young woman from the West Coast who has a data gathering sort of on the surface mechanism. That's great for the Arctic. That's going to be also, all of the talk, of course, is about dual use. So you have these great innovations that can be used to track ice, fish stocks, algae, measuring, water temperatures, right whales, all of that. And then there is the military application that protects our shores, that detects incoming threats. AI being layered over many of these new innovations, and computer learning and ability to synergize some of that data and determine what the response should be. So we in Atlantic Canada are blessed, number one, with young, ambitious, educated people, and let's just say more experienced people like yourself, and that has to be part of the synergy too. But I still am very passionate and and very optimistic. You have to be. I mean, these are dark times, but when you walk through this hall, when you see some of the work that's being done, when you see our young men and women in uniform, that to me is perhaps the greatest signal and sign that our country is in good hands. We have people who are still so dedicated, so courageous, and so willing to put their lives on the line to protect their fellow citizens. They're our greatest citizens, our greatest asset.
It's funny that you mentioned that, Peter. I had a conversation with Admiral Santarpia and Admiral Baines, and they both now help train the next generation of officers in the simulators. And two very separate conversations I had over a week apart, and both of them commented just on how engaged that next generation was, and how excited they were to be part of their training, and how they felt so positive that we've got the right people here.
We sure do.
Right?
They're switched on.
They're switched on.
And yet we need to be ready to receive them and to give them the equipment, the protective equipment and otherwise, to unleash some of their potential, to use these new innovations, including cyber and the activity, the prolific activity and growth online. But they're coming at it with a much different perspective than the generation before them. And I do feel that we're down in terms of our recruitment numbers. We have concerns around retention. Part of it, only part of it, has to do with the opportunities that they see. And to be competitive with the private sector, our military have to be given, modern equipment, modern aircraft, modern weaponry, and that is also a critical component to protect everything that's dear. Let's never forget why we have a military. It's to protect Canada's interests first. And you quickly referenced the Arctic. That's an area of vulnerability that we're looking to address. All governments are seized with that. NORAD modernization, a big part of it. Engagement with our Aboriginal population, our First Nations, the Inuit in the Arctic. That is going to receive more and more attention. And the good news is, much of this technology is going to allow us to, euphemistically wrap our arms around that incredibly important, resource-filled, dynamic environment in the Arctic. And that's a big part of the solution that we need to project sovereignty into the high Arctic.
Yeah, and of course Atlantic Canada, a stepping off point to get up there, right? And Peter, you've had a great lens globally and certainly represented our country on an international stage and many times in your career. NATO has found their way to our doorstep here over at Cove through NATO. Diana, give me your thoughts on that.
What an amazing announcement that has been for the region. And for Canada's contribution to NATO. I mean, we get knocked for not being at 2% at various times. We've been tracking in the right direction and fallen back. But that NATO DIANA, the Defense Innovation Accelerator Fund that will be based here, this hub that is going to be in Halifax and serve not just Atlantic Canada, serve NATO's interest in North America, which is sometimes a bit of a tough concept for people to understand. But the crossover between these innovators and some of this remarkable advancement in technology, that's what it's there to do. It's there to harness that potential and to bring it to NATO. It's also going to bring it to all of the 32 NATO member countries. It'll give Canadians not an advantage, truly, but it will give us an opportunity to compete with some of our allies to be the best, to come up with gold medal technology. And, coming back to the Arctic, it's not a coincidence that it's here. NATO, and, our government and other governments have sometimes been reluctant to have NATO be too present in the Arctic. The addition of Finland and Sweden has sort of changed that perspective. In addition to something I'm going to say that's not hyperbole, but the Russians are there. They're on the other side of the Arctic Ocean. We know that China are sending research vessels and in some cases submarines and submersibles into the Arctic. Canada needs, the Americans, through NORAD, need to up our game and our presence. And that doesn't mean weaponizing. It doesn't mean, intruding into, a space where we're not needed or wanted. But that is our country. These are our people, our Aboriginal people in the Arctic. Many of them are rangers, and we need to equip and engage with them in a way that gives them greater ability to exercise sovereignty. And so a lot going on, a lot of very dynamic, important files, NATO being one of them. They have, and this is the last thing I'll say, they have by necessity upped their game. There's a war on the doorstep of Europe. Russia, the unintended consequences of many of the horrible things that Russia has done in perpetrating this war is they have allowed NATO really to up its game and to expand, bring more countries in. Ukraine has to become part of NATO and the European Union. We're going to learn more from Ukraine on how to increase our security capabilities than any other current member of NATO, because they're doing it. They're doing it now out of necessity. So many moving parts in the world today, Alan.
Peter, I really appreciate your lens. You're right to raise some flags here, to say there's some things we want to work on, but I love your optimistic sense that we're poised and ready to lean into this when we're unleashed.
And we've done it before.
And
Let's never forget.
Yeah.
We've risen to the occasion. We were first in, last out on many of these conflicts. And Canadians, are warriors, but they're protectors and they're liberators, and they're there for the right reason.
You're a true Canadian ambassador, Peter. Listen, thanks very much for your service that you continue to serve. You're about as Canadian as the tragically hip. Now, I know that you got to run the roads and get kids to hockey rinks and stuff like that. You're a family man as well, but you're really giving us a great lens. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Alan. Thank you.